Have you ever wondered what the most dangerous shipwreck is? Hi everyone, welcome back to the Jackson Talks channel. Today we're diving into one of the most British approaches to danger management I've ever encountered, ignoring a massive bomb until it becomes someone else's problem. And I mean that literally. Today we're talking about the SS Richard Montgomery, a World War II shipwreck sitting in the Thames Estuary, packed with enough explosives to theoretically create the largest non-nuclear explosion on British soil since World War II ended. So buckle up, because we're about to explore the story of how 1,400 tons of aging munitions ended up sitting in shallow water near London for over 80 years, why nobody will touch it, and whether the residents of Sheerness should maybe consider moving. The government line is keep calm and don't worry, but here is the kicker. When has the government saying don't worry ever been reassuring? Let's rewind back to August 1944. World War II is in full swing. The Allies have just liberated Cherbourg in France, and the logistical machine of war is running at full tilt. Enter the SS Richard Montgomery, a Liberty ship. These vessels were built at an absolutely bonkers pace. Over 2,700 Liberty ships were constructed during the war, averaging 2 ships completed every 3 days. The Montgomery herself was completed in just 137 days in Jacksonville, Florida. Quick construction methods, low-grade steel used that was welded, not riveted in order to save time. You know, all those things you really want in a ship's construction, especially one that's about to carry thousands of tons of high explosives. Named after Richard Montgomery, an Irish officer who fought for the British, then switched to the Continental Army during the American Revolution. Because apparently nothing says irony like naming a ship after someone who rebelled against Britain and then having it almost blow up in British waters, the vessel set sail for England as part of convoy HX-301. Her cargo? Oh, just a casual 6,127 tons of munitions. We're talking bombs of all varieties. Fragmentation bombs, cluster bombs, white phosphorus bombs, 100 pounds and 500 pounds bombs, detonators, smoke bombs, and enough TNT to make a Michael Bay movie look subtle. All of this was destined for Cherbourg to supply. Allied forces advancing through Europe. Now here's where things get spicy. The Montgomery arrives at the Thames Estuary on August 20, 1944, and anchors at the Great Nore anchorage to await convoy formation. The harbour master, whose name is lost to history, orders the ship to anchor off the north edge of Sheerness Middle Sand. Small problem. At low tide, there's only about 30 feet of water there. The Richard Montgomery, well, she's drawing 31 feet. Math wasn't exactly the harbour master's strong suit, apparently. This was such an obviously terrible idea that the assistant harbour master refused to carry out the order, unless it was put in writing, which, as you know, is exactly what you do when your boss tells you to do something catastrophically stupid. You cover your ass and make sure there's a paper trail. Predictably, disaster strikes. The anchor didn't hold in the sandy bottom. The ship begins to drift toward the sandbank while other vessels in the anchorage start sounding their horns frantically, the 1940s equivalent of laying on your car horn and screaming, "What the hell are you doing?" But here's the really incredible part. The captain was asleep in his cabin, and inexplicably, nobody went to wake him. This almost feels like a Monty Python sketch. A ship laden with enough explosives to level a small city is drifting onto a sandbank. Horns are blaring all around, and through it all Captain Sleepyhead is having a nice nap. The Montgomery runs aground amidships, right in the middle on the crest of the sandbank. When the tide recedes, the ship's back breaks, because remember, this is a hastily built wartime vessel with a known weak spot in her design. She literally snaps in half like a soggy Kit Kat, but way less satisfying and infinitely more dangerous. Now, to the credit of everyone involved, they immediately recognized this as a problem. A rescue team was organized within 3 days to offload the munitions. Note, not to save the ship, she was considered a lost cause, but to rescue the cargo before it turned into an unscheduled fireworks display that nobody wanted tickets for. They sent dock workers from Rochester who got to work, and for a while, things went, well, not terribly. They managed to remove several thousand tons of ordnance. On September 24th, reality reasserted itself when the hull cracked further, and the forward holds flooded. The salvage team kept working frantically for another month, but on September 25, 1944, they had to abandon ship. The Montgomery flooded completely and split fully in half. The final tally? About half the cargo removed. The other half, approximately 1,400 tons of explosives, remained on board, sitting in shallow water about 1.5 miles from Sheerness, and it's still there today, 80 years later, just sitting there, rusting, waiting. The wreck now lies at an average depth of 49 feet, leaning to starboard like a drunk trying to look casual. At all states of tide, Her 3 masts are visible above the water, a perpetual reminder that somewhere beneath those waves is enough explosive power to ruin everyone's day in a roughly 5-kilometer radius. So what exactly is the problem we're dealing with here? The remaining cargo is like a greatest hits compilation of things that go boom. We're talking approximately 14,300 bombs of various types. Fragmentation bombs, which are particularly concerning because they're fused, making them the most likely to spontaneously detonate. Fun, hey. 100 pounds phosphorus bombs, which are delightful because white phosphorus burns underwater and is generally horrible in every conceivable way. Various sizes of general-purpose bombs, detonators, because why not store the things designed to make other things explode right next to those other things? Cluster bombs, smoke bombs, and a partridge in a pear tree. I'm kidding, but honestly, at this point, why not? All told, we're looking at the explosive equivalent of about 1,434 tons of TNT. To put that in perspective, that's roughly 1/7 of the energy released by the atomic bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Not quite nuclear, but if this goes bang, it would be in the very, very bad category. Now, you might be thinking, why don't they just remove the explosives? Get some experts in there, carefully offload everything, problem solved. But let me tell you about the SS Keels. The Keels was a Polish freighter that was sunk in 1946 off Folkestone, not far from the Montgomery's location, that was also carrying munitions. In July 1967, salvage experts decided to neutralize her contents. They set off a first, then a second cutting charge on the hull without serious effect. Encouraged by this, they fired a third charge. Near midday on July 22, 1967, the keels exploded with a force equivalent to a 4.5 magnitude earthquake. The blast created a 20-foot deep crater in the seabed. The shockwave was detected 5,000 miles away. In Folkestone, windows shattered, chimneys cracked, and according to one local councillor who ran a cliffside hotel, it felt like an earthquake. He warned his wife to be ready to evacuate in case the building collapsed. Miraculously, nobody was injured, though several people were treated for shock. Now here's the kicker. The Keels was about 4 miles offshore, in deeper water than the Montgomery, and carried only a fraction of the explosives. The Montgomery sits in shallower water, masts visible at all tides, holds far more ordnance, and is only 1.5 miles from Sheerness. After the Keels incident, the official policy toward the Montgomery changed from "we should probably do something about that ship" to a different approach of "let's not poke that angry bear." And that policy has remained in place for over 50 years, the prevailing wisdom. Leave it alone, and maybe it won't kill us all. So what would actually happen if the Montgomery went up? Well, strap in, because the scenarios range from pretty bad to genuinely apocalyptic. Back in 1970, the Royal Military College of Science put together a worst-case scenario assessment. Their conclusion? If all 1,400 tons exploded simultaneously, it would throw a 300-meter wide column of water, mud, metal, and munitions nearly 3,000 meters into the air. That's almost 10,000 feet for the imperially inclined, and generate a tsunami up to 5 meters high. It would blow out virtually every window in Sheerness, a town of roughly 37,000 people, cause severe structural damage to buildings throughout the town, and potentially cause a shockwave that would barrel up the River Thames towards central London. Professor David Alexander from University College London noted that significant damage could occur 5.1 kilometers from the wreck. This includes the town of Sheerness, parts of the Medway Estuary, the Isle of Grain, which by the way hosts 28 petroleum storage tanks and 5 natural gas holders. Just imagine, the wreck explodes, sends a shockwave through industrial facilities storing massive quantities of petroleum and liquefied natural gas. Oh, and let's not forget about shipping. The wreck sits right next to one of the busiest shipping lanes in Britain. Container ships, LNG carriers containing 3 large tanks of liquefied natural gas routinely pass within 200 meters of the Montgomery. As Professor Alexander noted, it's remarkable that none of them have accidentally run into the Montgomery over the last 80 years, given how close they pass by. The Thames Barrier, London's flood defense system, takes 90 minutes to close. If the Montgomery exploded and sent a wave up the Thames, there wouldn't be time to shut the barn door, mainly because there wouldn't be much barn left. Recent assessments in 2022 by Defense Research and Development Canada concluded that a blast on this scale would be one of the world's biggest non-nuclear explosions, causing widespread destruction and death. But here's something interesting. Professor Alexander notes that for a truly catastrophic explosion, all the bombs would need to detonate simultaneously. Given that there are over 14,000 bombs of many different types down there, it's actually quite hard to envision a scenario where they all blow up at once. More likely, you'd get a partial detonation, still devastating, but not quite the knock on Satan's door level event, even if only 10% of the cargo detonated. you're still looking at the equivalent of 140 tons of TNT going off in a densely populated area with critical infrastructure nearby. Not exactly comforting. So what's being done about all this? Well, the Montgomery is monitored 24/7 by the Maritime and Coast Guard Agency. There's an exclusion zone around the wreck, marked by buoys, with visual and radar surveillance. In 1973, she became the first wreck designated as dangerous under the Protection of Wrecks Act 1973. There are warning signs displayed on the masts themselves stating danger unexploded ammunition. Do not approach or board this wreck by order. The wreck is surveyed regularly using high-resolution multi-beam sonar. No divers, the visibility is too poor, and honestly, would you want that job? Hey mate, fancy swimming around in murky water surrounded by 14,000 aging explosive devices? The surveys paint a concerning picture. The wreck has been deteriorating for over 80 years. The superstructure is gone. Regular surveys since 2002 show gradual deterioration, with new cracks appearing, particularly in the bow section. A 2023 survey revealed that the entire forward section of the wreck had increased its lean by approximately 15 centimeters eastward. The hull is showing accelerated deterioration in some areas. The official assessment. Whilst significant structural collapse does not appear to be imminent, surveys suggest that this prospect is getting closer, which is government speak for the ticking has gotten noticeably louder. In May 2025, things got interesting enough that the Secretary of State for Transport restricted flying below 13,000 feet within a radius of 1 nautical mile of the wreck. You don't implement new flight restrictions after 80 years unless something has changed. There was a plan to remove the masts as they were deteriorating and in danger of falling into the cargo holds and potentially triggering a detonation. This work was scheduled for 2020. Then, in December 2023, the MCA determined the masts had degraded more than expected and needed urgent removal. This was then postponed, scheduled for March 2024, then postponed again when unidentified metallic objects were found around the wreck. As of now, those masts are still there, slowly rusting, a monument to bureaucratic paralysis and the eternal British motto, keep calm and hope it doesn't explode. Over the decades, a number of options have been considered. For example, do nothing at all, remove all the munitions, encase the whole wreck in concrete, bury it in sand or remove the wreck entirely. Removing the munitions has been estimated to cost tens of millions of pounds and would probably require evacuating Sheerness. Professor Alexander mentioned that Smith Salvage said they could do it, but as yet they haven't been asked to, presumably because of the cost and risk. The official position, laid out in various reports, is that if left undisturbed, the wreck will eventually break up naturally, the ordnance will get wet and become neutralized, and even a small explosion at distance wouldn't set off the bulk of the cargo. The risk of major explosion is considered to be remote and probably becoming even less likely with the passage of time. However, and this is a big however, that assessment relies on the wreck remaining undisturbed. The problem is that time itself is disturbing the wreck. Every survey shows continued deterioration. The seabed around the wreck is dynamic. Strong tides shift things around. The hull plates are getting thinner. At some point structural failure will occur. That could be a large crack, loss of plates, deck collapse, any of which could shift the cargo. And then there's the human factor. The wreck sits in a major shipping lane. Security experts have noted concerns not just about accidental detonation, but potential sabotage or terrorist attack. There's even a bizarre sort of dark tourism around it, with people taking boat trips to see it. So all that being said, what's it like for the people of Sheerness and surrounding areas? Well, it's become part of the landscape literally and figuratively. Some locals have a fatalistic attitude. If it's been there 80 years without exploding, it's probably fine. Others are less sanguine. In 2012, Medway Council nicknamed it the Doomsday Wreck, which probably didn't help property values. There's a dark humor to it all. As one local put it online, if it keeps property prices low for islanders and stops Boris building an airport on top of us, then maybe the Montgomery is still useful. The SS Richard Montgomery represents a broader issue, the legacy of World War II munitions. There are hundreds of shipwrecks around the world containing explosives, chemical weapons, and other hazardous materials. The Beaufort's Dyke in the Irish Sea is a dumping ground for an estimated 1 million tons of munitions. The Baltic Sea has massive amounts of chemical weapons dumped after the war. These time bombs are ticking away globally. The Montgomery is unique because of its proximity to dense population, its location in extremely busy waters, and the sheer quantity of explosives involved. But the fundamental problem, what do you do with aging, unstable munitions in inaccessible locations, is universal. Professor David Alexander, an expert in risk and disaster reduction, notes that the level of uncertainty virtually precludes any kind of rigorous assessment of risk. The data needed for a proper risk assessment doesn't exist and probably can't be collected without disturbing the wreck. It's a catch-22. To know how dangerous it is, we'd need to examine it closely, but examining it closely might be the thing that sets it off. So, how dangerous is the SS Richard Montgomery? The honest answer is, we don't really know for certain. The uncertainty itself is part of what makes it so unnerving. The optimistic view: it's been there 80 years without exploding. The explosives may be degraded to the point of being less dangerous. Water may have neutralized much of it. The pessimistic view is that it's been deteriorating for 80 years, becoming structurally weaker and more unstable. The explosives could be more dangerous when degraded. It sits in one of the busiest waterways in Britain. Any major structural failure could shift the cargo and trigger detonation. The risk is low but increasing. And the consequences would be catastrophic. The reality? Probably somewhere in the middle. But that middle still includes potential for one of the largest non-nuclear explosions in modern history. What's certain is this: the SS Richard Montgomery is a memorial to the lasting consequences of war, the limits of engineering, the challenges of risk management, and the very British approach of muddling through while hoping for the best. Is it dangerous? Yes, catastrophically so. Will it explode tomorrow? Probably not. Will it explode eventually? The surveys suggest that without intervention, structural failure is inevitable. It's just a question of when and what happens then. So sleep tight, Sheerness. The government says not to worry. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this deep dive into underwater anxieties, make sure to like, drop a comment, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and I will catch you next time.